Welcome to Sky Incident Files. On November 12th, 1996, something catastrophic happened in the skies over India. In this explainer, we're going to break down the deadliest mid-air collision in the history of aviation. We'll look at how this single tragedy exposed massive systemic failures and led to crucial safety reforms that, honestly, changed the rules of the sky forever. Okay, let's set the scene. High above India, two massive airplanes were on a collision course. You had a Kazakhstan Airlines flight, and it was on its way down, descending towards New Delhi. At the very same time, a Saudi Airlines 747 was climbing, just having taken off. For the air traffic controller on the ground, they were just two blinking dots on a screen, getting closer and closer until they merged into one, and then they were just gone. But these weren't just dots on a screen, were they? On board that Kazakh flight were traders, businessmen heading to India to buy goods to support their families back home. And the Saudi flight, it was packed with 231 Indian workers, carpenters, construction guys, domestic help, all heading to Saudi Arabia to build a better life. Two planes absolutely filled with hopes and dreams. Meanwhile, down on the ground, in the small city of Charki Dadri, nobody had any idea what was unfolding above them. They just saw this massive flash of light rip across the sky, and then they heard a sound like thunder. And then debris. Huge pieces of metal just started raining from the sky. The abstract horror on that radar screen had just become terrifyingly real. So to really understand how a catastrophe like this could even be possible, we need to take a step back. We need to look at the basic rules that are designed to prevent it. The fundamental principles that keep millions of us safe in the air every single day. You know, the sky isn't some chaotic free-for-all. It's actually incredibly organized. It's crisscrossed by what are called airways. Think of them like predefined, invisible highways that all planes have to follow. This system is the absolute foundation of keeping things orderly and safe up there. And on these sky highways, planes are separated by altitude, or what's known as a flight level. Now, the golden rule, set by international standards, is that there must always be at least 1,000 feet of vertical space between any two aircraft. It's a simple buffer, but it's absolutely critical for safety. Now, the people responsible for making sure planes follow these rules are, of course, the air traffic controllers. But here's the catch. Back in 1996, their tools were pretty limited. They were using what's called primary radar, which only showed a plane's position as a little blip on a screen. Critically, it could not show its altitude. That means controllers had to rely entirely on pilots telling them their height over the radio, a dependency that would turn out to be fatal. So as investigators started digging in, it became clear this wasn't just one single mistake. Nope, this was a chain reaction of failures. And to understand this, investigators use a concept called the Swiss cheese model, which is a brilliant way to show how a bunch of small problems can line up just right to create an absolute catastrophe. Okay, so picture this. Every layer of safety, every procedure, every piece of technology, every person is a slice of Swiss cheese. Now, each slice has holes in it, right? Those are potential flaws. Individually, a hole isn't a problem, but when by some terrible chance, all the holes in all the different slices line up perfectly, a hazard can pass straight through, and that leads to disaster. And on November 12th, the holes lined up. So here's the first hole. The flight recorder showed that the Kazakh pilots didn't have great English skills. They actually had a radio operator on board who was translating the instructions from English into Russian. And the final critical instruction from air traffic control to hold their altitude at 15,000 feet was just misunderstood. The plane kept descending right into the path of the other one. The second hole? This one was infrastructural. I mean, it was built into the system. Delhi's airport, at the time, used the exact same air corridor for both arrivals and departures. Think about that. This design forced planes to fly literally head-on towards each other in the same narrow sky highway, relying only on that 1,000-foot vertical buffer to keep them safe. And the third hole was that outdated radar technology we talked about. The controller could see the two dots getting closer and closer, but he had no way of knowing the Kazakh plane had dropped below its assigned altitude. He was completely blind to the most critical piece of information. He had no choice but to trust a verbal report that, we now know, was based on a misunderstanding. And the final hole, well, it was all about immense human pressure. Back in the 90s, being an air traffic controller was one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. And at the exact same time, the black box revealed the Kazakh pilots were actually distracted. They were complaining to each other about Delhi's air traffic right before the collision, instead of focusing on the controller's instructions. But out of this immense tragedy came urgent, systemic change. So let's look at the legacy of Charkhi Dadri and how the lessons learned from that terrible day have made our skies fundamentally safer for all of us. The response was swift, and it was decisive. They went right after the holes that caused the disaster. First, that crowded sky was fixed by creating separate air corridors for planes arriving and departing. Then, the technology gap was closed by making collision avoidance systems mandatory. And finally, the language barrier was tackled with a new global standard. Now, this biggest technological fix, TCAS, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, this thing was a total game changer. It's basically a system inside the cockpit that talks directly with other planes nearby. If it senses a risk of collision, it doesn't wait for the pilots or for ATC. It sounds an alarm and gives the pilots direct automated commands. Climb or descend. It's the ultimate last line of defense. We can never, ever forget the cost of these lessons, $349. That's how many people lost their lives in this collision. 349 families were just shattered. Their unimaginable loss was the catalyst that forced the global aviation industry to get safer and to make sure a tragedy like this would never, ever happen again. And this really brings us to our final thought. The Swiss cheese model teaches us that safety isn't a one-and-done time. It's a constant process of finding and plugging those holes. The Charkhi Dadri disaster revealed fatal flaws in the system of its time. So the question we have to keep asking ourselves is, what are the hidden flaws, the unnoticed holes in the complex systems we all rely on today? Thank you for watching.